Welcome from the Nordic Africa Institute to the launch of this virtual exhibition, Gold Matters, from Africa to the Amazon. The virtual exhibition is as a result of a collaboration between artists, miners, and researchers from parts of East and West Africa and the Amazon. In this webinar, speakers will give a taster to the exhibition, discussing photos from virtual walls. And I'd just like to take a moment, so please, we may have some technical challenges, so please bear with us, and we may fill them in with pre-recorded recordings. But before I introduce the speakers, I would like to welcome Professor Elizabeth Ferry, welcome, with Brandeis University in the USA, who will act as a discussant. Elizabeth is professor of anthropology and has conducted research and written extensively about mining, value, finance, and materiality, including on gold. We will also play two recordings from mining leaders, Josephine Agutu, a leader from the Tira Small-Scale Mining Association in Busia District, Uganda, and Gilson Gomez Kambwan, president of the Federation of Artisanal and Small-Scale Mining Cooperatives of the state of Mato Grosso in Brazil, both commenting on the exhibition. And I'll just quickly run through a sort of impressive list of speakers. So our speakers are Professor Elena Fischer, with the Nordic Africa Institute in Sweden, head of research here, but also project lead for the Gold Matters Transformation to Sustainability in Artisanal and Small-Scale Mining, which is the basis for this exhibition. And Dr. Sabine Luning, Associate Professor at Leiden University in the Netherlands, who's the lead curator for the exhibition and principal investigator on the project. We also have Mr. Ni Abodai with Nuku Studios in Ghana, a photographer and director of Nuku Studios. Mr. Christophe Sawadogo, an independent painter from Burkina Faso. Dr. Jorge Calivomontes, a postdoctoral researcher on the project at Unicamp in Brazil. Dr. Ronald Tongiwe, associate professor and co-investigator on the project at Mbarara University of Science and Technology in Uganda. Ms. Esther van de Kamp, a PhD student on the project at Leiden University in the Netherlands. Our own Dr. Cristiano Lanzano, a senior researcher here at the Nordic Africa Institute and principal investigator on the project. Professor Mayo Ditai, who's principal investigator on the project too at the Vrije University in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. I will now hand over to Elena Fischer to introduce the Gold Matters project and the virtual exhibition. Very much look forward to it. Eleanor?
Thank you very much, Patience. And I'm delighted that you can all join us today to mark the launch of our exhibition. If I can give a little bit of a background, talking about sustainability and gold mining is, of course, profoundly challenging. But I'd like to just explain for a minute our motivation. Now, within international policy, for instance, the UN Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals, there's a real drive to have transformation in how we live our lives, to change our societies, to change our economies, to have actions which are more sustainable and ways of living which aren't creating unsustainability for the world in which we live today. This, of course, is all very well. What does it mean for people and countries, particularly in the global south, for whom the world is a very unequal place, and for people who getting by day to day, everyday living is maybe the primary challenge? Also, of course, people who may not be the main culprits for particularly the changes to climate that we witness today, but certainly bear the brunt of its effects. And if we're talking about artisanal and small-scale gold mining particularly, where you will have very profound institutional and political barriers to sustainability actions. So all of these issues are part of what we're grappling with within our project today. Now, if you're thinking about sustainability, there are very many different perspectives. In relation to artisanal and small-scale gold mining in particular, They can be very polarizing and very conflictual. Miners themselves can be identified as the main protagonists of unsustainability, and already in very many places they are criminalized and excluded from policy debate, and the debates where actually one needs to know their perspectives in order to generate more sustainable actions into the future. So with this in mind, within our project, we sought to try and find ways to slightly step outside the polarity of these debates. And we did this by identifying methods and ways that we could work in communities with miners and with other stakeholders in these communities, particularly through the arts and working with artists and working with miners in a participatory fashion. So that takes us to our exhibition today. This was originally conceived as what we called a traveling pop-up exhibition. And the idea was that it would travel between Ghana, Uganda, Brazil, Europe, possibly other places. And the point of popping up was to hold events that could actually create the arts and transform the exhibition as it moved through countries and contexts, in the process stimulating debate on sustainability for us to hold with others. Now, of course, we managed to have one event in Kejetia in northern Ghana, which Sabine is about to speak about, and Ni Obadai and Christophe Sawadogo were there, artists working with people in that community. But then COVID-19 hit, as we all know, and this virtual exhibition was not planned. It's a flexible response to the circumstances of lockdowns. As transdisciplinary researchers, we're all very mindful of the inequalities inherent in research itself. Somehow one tries to acknowledge these inequalities, maybe to have methods, participatory methods that at least find ways of working together. So creating a virtual exhibition digitally, which introduces another layer in inequality, was maybe not what we would have intended. Nevertheless, it enables us to bring it to an audience around the world, yourselves. So we're very pleased that it at least has some benefits. On that note, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Sabine to continue this introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor. Good afternoon, good morning. So the question is, how did the Gold Matters team collaborate to shift from planned pop-up exhibitions to virtual exhibition? First of all, we took this transition quite literally. Why not make an online exhibition of the exhibition we had already organized in northern Ghana? Here, a brief illustration of what this exhibition in reality looked like as a point of departure. Here I show the wall where we are preparing the exhibition, but I want to move to the moment when the exhibition was actually launched and people came, kids from school, women, men, to attend it. And what I want to bring home is that this exhibition, first of all, showed forms of recognition. Look at this boy who recognizes a family member, and forms of mining that he is familiar with. But here we see two boys watching a mining terrain they're not so familiar with and looking with great interest how this is taking place. The third photograph again, we see a circle of women attending and sitting and watching Amazonian mining terrains in form of dredging, actually. These photos show that the exhibition of Kejetia was appreciated as valuable and joyful in itself, but also served to discuss the diversity in mining terrains. It allowed for lovely discussions about these differences. Do the different ways of mining and living inspire, or do they raise additional concerns? What conversations between miners does the distinction between the familiar and the not so familiar terrains bring about? This is an aspiration we also have with the virtual exhibition we are launching today. As you can see here in the floor plan, the exhibition of the exhibition is only a very small part of the whole virtual exhibition. Very early in our teamwork, we expressed the ambition that the online exhibition should bring to the fore the project collaborations at large. Why not make the exhibition of the exhibition just the start, level 1, and then dig deeper into the project potentials? How then did we conceptualize the organization of that? You can say that rooms 1, 2, and 3 are concerned with portraying the social engagements and the transdisciplinary character of the project. The 3 rooms further down address the distinctive themes, in-depth terrains, gold lifeways, and moving matters, each with a regional wall. All the team members will speak about the 3 themes and the place of art in the project. Let me just give glimpses of what we call co-laboring in research relations. Let me move to the room Arts of Co-laboring. First of all, I'm showing the end of the wall of West Africa. Actually, I'm moving backwards. First of all, these images portray conventional practices in anthropological research, co-laboring in the literal sense of working together. In anthropology, we call this method participant observation. You do not just look, you do things together. Of course, these research collaborations do not come about in a world without frictions and inequalities. On the contrary, the notion of co-labor is chosen to emphasize that it takes hard work to communicate knowledge and experiences. These inequalities can perhaps best be highlighted by some of the images of the underground. Even though we as researchers did descend in certain artisanal mines, for entering others, we lacked the skills and had concerns about safety. A bit embarrassed, we asked our collaborators, here Haruna, to film and photograph for us, so that later, above ground, we could see and discuss what was going on there. These conversations, though, stimulated us, all of us, I have to say, to experiment with innovative visual methods, to envision underground structures and working practices into which miners worked, in which miners make friends and team up, but which is also an in-depth terrain of severe competition, power relations, and dangers. Our project does not flatten inequalities and differences. Rather, the sometimes painful ways of becoming aware of them allow us to convey and try to address them, as we try to demonstrate in the thematic rooms. One final comment on curating this exhibition. I am actually very proud of the collaborative efforts the exhibition testifies to. We've come a long way from the first idea of doing an exhibition of the exhibition to what it is actually now. I even think that the exhibition in its current state is the outcome of a process which has maybe been over-enthusiastic and too abundant in words and images. We do offer it here today as a stage and a moment in a longer process. We will continue to curate, maybe even in the sense of curing it from abundance. We're looking forward to comments, suggestions from audiences who are all invited to enroll in the conversations on present and futures of artisanal mining this exhibition wants to stimulate. We start now with 3 speakers reflecting on the virtual room, artistic and artisanal. To kick off, I hand over to me, Obadai, who will be speaking about the wall, Big Dreams, Life Built on Gold. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here and share some of my experience with you. My name is Neo Bodai. I'm a photographer and a member of Gold Matters. And my project is called Big Dreams, Life Built on Gold. It was a collaboration between myself and Chinese writer Yiting Sun. The photographing of Big Dreams begins in 2013 when there was a public demand for the Ghana government to take action on the devastating impact that illegal galamsey mining had on the environment and communities. For a long time, the government seemed to have turned a blind eye to this issue until violent conflicts were taking place between local miners and illegal Chinese immigrant mining groups. In response, the government sent in security forces to deport the thousands of illegal Chinese immigrants, many of whom took flight or went into hiding. I predominantly work with black and white film, and my approach in my photography was to stay open and non-judgmental with my visual narrative. Whenever I had seen photographic works on mining in Ghana, which much of it was focused on the labor of the miners, so I felt it was important to bring into view the lives of people who were mostly invisible and whose lives were affected by the situation. It was important that, as much as possible, I nurture relationships in order to connect with the people I would have encounters with and who wanted to share who would want to share their lives with us. So I could better understand the impact of small-scale illegal mining, and in a way, what I call the lives of, well, the in-between lives. Since tensions were high and there was a high degree of suspicion, especially towards strangers with cameras, I decided after our first tour of the mines and communities that I would bring along a Polaroid instant camera and to offer people portraits of themselves, especially with those who had a lot of mistrusts between because of the way media positioned miners. This exchange was welcomed, and I deeply appreciated, and from both sides, I would say, these portraits were deeply appreciated. And it was a pleasure for me to make the portraits. And in this exchange, I myself received a lot of appreciation and trust. As I mentioned earlier, building trust was an essential aspect of how I work. The following images highlight the impact on lives, and I'm grateful to the families and individuals who shared their stories with me. To begin with, I will start with a slide of Mr. Mensah, who, living in the Kibi eastern region of Ghana, had farmland and built a home for him and his family, and one day was warned by miners that they would come prospecting on his land. He took the case to court, won the case, but was without protection, lost his land and property. If we move on to slide number 8, to the next slide, which will be about, I'm going to talk to you very briefly about education and communities. Community education and mining. Are we there? Just for a second, yeah. If we can just go a little bit further, we see that's it. There we are. Many of my encounters were to do with also looking at the situation with children in communities as well. And here I had met Alfred King Sharpston and Joe Danker, who set up a school in Kejetia. Because when they arrived in the mining community at least 20 years ago, there was no school. And so to get the children out of mines and off the streets, they set up the school. And at the same time, they would mine and teach using the funds that they got from mining to support the school. You'll also see some of the children in the class. Some of the older children would, at the time, were also engaging in mining at the time. To the right of your screen is Alfred. All very wonderful people. We saw in an earlier slide that there was some also water situations where children's health affected because there was no public water systems, and all the natural water systems had been polluted. My last slide will be on the tragedy of death in mining, where I had met in Kibi also the families of Kweku Fori and Felicia Chuma, who lost their 2 teenage boys when they went playing in a pit one Sunday that collapsed on them. It devastated the family. Now, on a lighter note, just to end very quickly, as I'm going beyond my time, finally, a somewhat positive ending is the only group of female miners that we met throughout our journey in Ghana, throughout our journeys, and they were mining in order to help sustain their families. So I want to thank you all very much. And now I will hand over to Christoph, wonderful artist he is, to speak about the Wall New Dreams, Imagining Gold Lives. Thank you very much.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much, Ni. Thank you for your speech. Thank you for your image. And yes, and I would like to be thankful also to Sabine for the assistance when I will be speaking of my paintings. So in the first photo, you can see women, they are digging the ground, or they are looking for sand, or maybe they are looking for gold. So they work on the ground in the first image, where you can see 3 persons on the left. On the middle of the image, you can see a young girl wearing a bucket on the back, and something also in the hand. And at the third image, you can see persons walking, and they're going, we don't know where. So this past years, 3 years or maybe more, I've been working on the gold on the miners places, and so in the gold fields, I have subjects, I have inspiration. So I work on person, women, men working in this site. So you can see these persons are miners and or are workers in the gold fields. I also work sometimes on drought, because my country is a dry country where it rains rarely, and it hardly rain in my country. We have sometimes in a year, we have 2 or 3 months of water. So I work on the lack of water. And yes, it's one of my subjects of my inspiration themes. Yes, okay. This following painting shows, okay. Sorry, can I? So you can see the works we have done when we were in Tarkwa here in group, and collaboration in collaboration with Gold Matters members here, common work here, and I have also worked with the laureates in this drawing where I hold the drawing in my hand. So when the Gold Matters members were in the gold fields, I tried to work with the laureates in the gold fields, in the where they were living. So we used the ground, and we used also carbon, we used also inks, and we worked together on these drawings. For example, here you can see the profile of the young boy, because in the gold fields, we notice that many young boys have big dreams, such as becoming rich one day, or becoming like Rambo, becoming like Van Damme in the films they can see. Sometimes they have video clips in the gold fields. So here you have the golden boy in the first drawing, and in the second drawing you have women wearing hats and wearing materials to get gold. So you have 3 women in the second image walking and going to look for gold. So it is a work of collaboration between the lawyers and me in these paintings. And is there another painting in the following case? Can I see, Sabine? Please, can I see? If not, I can say that, yes, working with a group of persons, I think it gives me other perspectives. It is not like when I work alone in my studio, and when I work with a group. For example, when I was in the gold field in the mining place, you see that when you work here it's painting on gold fields. Here you can see people here and animals also working in the gold fields. You can see the colors are ground, and also sometimes I put yellow to make give the atmosphere of gold. So it's in a gold field and people working there. You can see this. Yes. On the left also it's the same. So I would like to say, before ending my intervention, I would like to say that working with people is very, very important for me, because in the village where I have been, sometimes if you work together, people are at ease to tell by the drawings, by art, what they feel. But if they are alone, sometimes they are humble, they don't want to express themselves. But through our art, in a group, women or men, they say what they want to say without any complex, without any problems. And so art is a very, very good link for people to collaborate and to express critics, sometimes critical subject like violence, like terrorism, for example, or maybe subject that are difficult to say, to express in Africa particularly. Thank you very much, everybody, for spending time to follow what I was saying. Thank you, Sabine, for the images. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ni. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Christophe. Thank you, Ni. Your work is great. Now I share my, yes. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jorge Cavimontes, and I will comment the very interesting room called Artistic and Artisanal, especially related to the world Amazon. And I will use this presentation. It is evident that the long presence of miners and mining culture in the Brazilian Amazon and the Guianas is expressed in a very diverse local artwork. And we can find these art expressions on walls, streets, and the miners' bodies. In Brazil, it is impossible to miss the giant statues of garimpeiros, the miners, in many villages throughout the Amazon region, where small-scale gold mining is predominant. They are a tribute made by local people to the garimpeiros, who are seen as pioneers of the Amazon. These statues act as landmarks that garimpeiros use to reinforce their pride as protagonists of their regional history, and also as a political statement to defend their profession and to express their position about land rights and the use of natural resources. In this way, status claimed to identity of garimperos as explorers and developers, and reinforced small-scale gold mining as essential for local economy throughout history. This encounter of past and present, of old and modern, is also visible in local street art on the walls of these villages. This graffiti saying Itaituba, the enchanted El Dorado, embodies the interpretation of mining culture by a younger generation, the man with his gold pen. This is a romanticized image of garimpero, and it appeals to an identity connected to history and not necessarily to the complex activity performed nowadays. These murals also evoke popular stereotypes about garimperos and indigenous peoples. Here, the image of a garimpero is close to the image of a native North American, not Brazilian at all, with an axe and a toucan in a very bizarre combination. In French Guiana, public walls are also used to express the opposition to gold mining. This mural reminds us that gold is not the only valuable natural resource. The real treasure is the green forest. Other symbols show how gold mining is central to the personal lives of garimperos, of the miners. So garimpo activity, this small-scale gold mining, and its meanings could be also impressed on the skin. Being an excavator driver is so important to this machine operator's life that he wanted to mark the love and pride for his job on his own skin. In this way, he expresses his position as an honest worker against the general stereotype of garimperos as bandits. Another artwork we can find is gold jewels. Garimperos often wear gold rings, necklaces, bracelets, and watches. The use of these gold jewels is very common among garimperos as a symbol of wealth and success. Jewels made of gold nuggets are more valuable, especially if the gold nuggets have impurities. In this case, the gold nuggets are prized as they come directly from the mine. All these jewels show that the expectation of many people who came to these regions looking for richness finally come true. They really embody the dream of all these people who came looking for prosperity, the dream of every garimpero. Thank you. And I will now hand over to Ronald and Esther to speak about the wall in depth terrains, focusing on Uganda. Thank you very much.
You're on mute, Ronald.
Thank you. We now turn to gold mining sites in southwest and southeast of Uganda. This room of the exhibition explores different levels or scales and what can be seen or not be seen from with our eyes from these different levels or scales, if you like. What you're looking at now is an aerial impression of Eastern Buhweju taken in June 2019. Here we see a photograph from my remote sensing work. Normally I would use imagery of this nature with radiometric properties to analyze land use and vegetation cover. But for purposes of this exhibition, I take an extract, which I present as a photograph. What I see in this image from far above is land marked by rugged terrain, a relatively coarse scale over a large area which precludes visualization of the details of gold mining. For this reason, zooming into particular sites is necessary. Like here, an image of one of the largest active gold mines in Bohejo is presented. We also see grasslands, woodlots, and small-scale agriculture around the sites. To the northeast of the gold mine are some settlements. Next image, please. What we see in this image is the hard rock gold mining at the ground level. We see some pits and a processing area. Out of the frame, there are shacks for food sellers and a road moving materials and bringing gold buyers from Kampala. I will now hand over to my colleague Esther to continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronald. We have now turned to Southeast Uganda, Busia district, where I did field work. Ronald has shown aerial and underground views of mining terrains. These two photos show underground mining terrains. Miners in Busia have to dig in many places through a layer of soft topsoil before arriving at the quartzite. Two mining methods are common: open cast mining and underground mining that is enabled by timbered shafts. On the left, we see an open cast mine, where one of Busia's mining associations works. Mining takes place here on multiple scales. This woman carries small pieces of gold ore that she mined in discarded soil and rock, while the excavator prepares the mine for more in-depth operations. On the right, I see the two methods combined, an open cast and below a timbered shaft. And I see a division of labor. Underground, men extract the ore, and women then carry the ore from the bottom of the mine to a storage place. While this labor division is typical in Busia, some women advocate for their positions that are more into the mine, closer to the gold. Many miners in Busia envision their future to be underground with the timber mines, because there is gold under their houses too. On the West Africa wall, you will find that underground mining with timbered shafts is much more common. The in-depth geopolitics of mining include a complex mix of aerial, on-ground, and underground perspectives and events. I will now hand over to Mario to speak about gold lifeways in the Amazon.
Thank you very much. Miners are experts who excavate, process, and trade gold. Men and women who are skilled at finding gold, mastering many different techniques, collaborating in the work, and negotiating access rights. They care for the gold, appropriate it, and construct their lives and cosmologies around it. In the Gold Matters project, we use the term gold lifeways, inspired by Anat Singh, to cover as many aspects as possible of how miners embody gold production as a way of life and livelihood. Gold lifeways are adaptable. When miners travel in their search for rich mining grounds, they take with them alternative technologies or a relevant skill set or new chemistry or geological knowledge. There are many options, but there are also many restraints. For example, technology may not be sufficient to mine specific deposits, or customary or legal authorities can cease produce or even the whole mining operation with all equipment. Or they send miners away, evicting them from the place where they found a rich vein. Or they may impose hefty fines or taxes, which may have the same result. Likewise, international gold and oil markets shape the preconditions for a thriving business and the material wealth from working the gold. The miners we work with in the Amazon leave their homes to travel hundreds of kilometers to the gold fields. Sometimes they join existing work teams in the mines, usually after finding out about the vacancy by word of mouth. Or they venture into the even bigger adventure of starting their own business and opening an autonomous mine. In the process, they build a new network of relationships to find their place to live and work, finance their business, and obtain the necessary permits and documents. And they build houses, not only as the physical places to find shelter from the hot sun and tropical rains, but also as homes, temporary or not. The place where they rest and have their meals, where they sit together and recover from work, tell stories about their families or other mines where they have worked, where they exchange news about how other mining operations are doing. 2 pictures from Maria's camp in Brokopondo, Suriname, give an impression of the infrastructure that miners erect. When we visited in February 2020, the group had moved to this location a few weeks earlier. The new quarters were still under construction, with plastic sheeting and local harvested wood as the primary materials used. A kitchen and an open barrack to hang the hammocks of the mill miners are easy to build. A separate closed quarter is made for the women. The miners are very competent house builders, if only because they move frequently. In fact, Maria and her co-workers left the camp 2 months later. The life of a miner cannot consist only of labor. In the vicinity of the workplaces, businesses come up for the entertainment of the miners. We took the following 2 pictures in a bar that had moved further inland when the clientele at the old location declined because the mines in the area were being exhausted. In this bar, gold is currency. Flip-flops, toothbrushes, telephone credit, and most of all alcoholic drinks, all are priced in grams of gold. Note that it's not cheap to drink a beer in the gold fields. At weekends, there are parties, sometimes bingo nights with live music, and many miners come here to relax their strenuous day-to-day activities in the mines. It is all part of the gold life phase in the Amazon. I will now hand over to Cristiano to speak about moving matters in West Africa.
Thank you, Mario. Yes, we have so far virtually walked across the aisles and the rooms of this exhibition. And now that we are moving towards the end, the last room, then I'd like to take up precisely this idea of movement. In mining regions, matters move continuously as ore moves from the underground to the surface, from its original state as a rock through the different processing phases up to the final product. And that's, for example, what our West African, our Burkinabe partner, IFSRA, has tried to represent and visualize here through photographs and mappings. So we see a map of the flows and the movements of materials and products and also people between different mining areas and mining sites. So gold ore and various forms of materials move between mining sites, and at the same time, as this room is called, moving matters a lot for miners. The geographic mobility of people is very important, and more or less temporary and seasonal migration is central to the organization of work and life in mining areas. In this first photo of the West African Moving Matters wall, you see a temporary camp of migrant miners in eastern Guinea. Well, West Africa has always been, since colonial times and then well into the post-colonial era, a space of intra-regional labor migration, and the expansion of small-scale mining has built on these patterns of mobility and has contributed to move people across borders. In this case, temporary migrants were from neighboring countries such as Mali and Burkina Faso were working in Guinea, and they brought with them technological innovations that enabled the extraction of gold from deeper deposits, primary deposits. So technology travels as well with people. And as we clearly see, if we move to the Ugandan, to the East Africa wall, then there is a wide range of technological and socio-technical options that move gold through the different stages of processing. And these techniques variously rely on the bodily motion of people who are involved in them, or instead of the mechanical movements of machines, such as, for example, the gold kacha that we see towards the end of the East African wall, the machine that is a machine that is supposed to promote a cleaner production of gold and rely on the elimination of chemical substance by using a mechanical movement particularly. Technology and technological differentiation, if we turn, for example, to the Amazonian wall, is also visible in the infrastructures that facilitate the mobility of miners and traders and other people, financial sponsors, to and from mining sites. As we see, for example, roads and highways and even airplanes transporting people and commodities in these areas. Going back to the West African wall, to the end of the West African wall, well, here we have a couple of photos where Zachary, one of our interlocutors, especially of Sabine's interlocutors, and Robert in their work in Ghana, and he reminds us of another kind of mobility that matters for miners, that is social mobility, and the hope to acquire wealth, to make projects for the future, and to move upwards along the social ladder. And it is this kind of dreams, of big dreams, as Ni calls them, of expectations and projections to the future that continue to attract people to gold mining areas all around the world. And now we are going to turn to our discussant, Professor Elizabeth Ferry, whose presentation will then be followed by 2 recordings about the exhibition done from mining leaders. Please, Professor Ferry, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I hope you can all hear me. So first, thank you to the Nordic Asia Institute and to Sabine Lunig and Eleanor Fisher and to Camilla Liedma for allowing me to be part of this really marvelous exhibit and event. I just want to start by saying that, you know, with this emphasis on co-laboring, the multi-sited focus and the open sight lines between researchers, miners, and artists, and through the combination of visual and textual and tactile practices, this exhibit enters in beautifully into a whole range of themes, impressions, ideas, and tensions that we see in encounters all over the world with respect to small-scale gold mining. And so it's a real pleasure and a real honor for me to participate in this, particularly because I've looked deeply into these kinds of issues, but in other parts of the world, especially in Colombia and Mexico. So in the time I have, what I think I'd like to do is just focus in on a few themes. Some of these are themes that have already been touched on. I won't share my screen with photos in the interest of time, but I will make reference to particular parts of the exhibit, and I hope that as you all go through later, perusing it and virtually walking through it, that some of these things may remind you. So the first theme, and we did not plan this, was mobility, so it's perfect that I come right after Cristiano. You know, this is one of the characteristics that we see in small-scale mining and large-scale mining. All of the different kinds of mobilities, the problems of moving materials, and also the ways in which materials come into contact with people and labor and capital. Often we're made aware of the ways in which large-scale mining companies and states, their capacities to move things, to move capital, to move mining infrastructures, to build enormous highways. And one thing I really appreciated about the exhibit was the ways in which these things are juxtaposed and brought along with these other capacities of mobility, dreams of mobility, strategies of mobility on the part of small-scale miners themselves. Sometimes, you know, there's a lot of awareness of the role of things like seasonal migration and other kinds of movement. But sometimes these are emphasized as kind of, you know, miners being yanked across the world or yanked across the surface or pushed in and out. And I really appreciated the ways in which mobility is something that people have unequal access to, but they also have their ways of working it out and making do. And this really comes out in particular places. Some of the images that really struck me through the exhibit that you know, picked up on these were the images from different parts of Brazil of, as Cristiano also pointed out, you know, aerial transport, waterway transport, highways, but also, you know, some other of these more kind of specific and localized forms of movement. I was especially struck by a small painting that was made on the monument in Kajitia for that was produced as part of the exhibit, of a bicycle, and the caption that goes with it is it's called Freedom on a Bicycle. This is, I'm referring now to the caption. It says, one young man drew a bicycle to express that the world would be better with free mobility. And I also really appreciated a moment when in that same area of putting together the exhibit, there's you know, the strategies of bringing materials for the exhibit itself, buying them in the market, bringing things in order to mount the photographs and paintings, and, you know, that these moving matter is also, you know, a strategy here. We also need to really remember the ways in which mobility has a toxicity and has a kind of violence associated with it. And this really comes out in Nee's photograph of the truck that has the sign on the back that says "Beware Sodium Cyanide Convoy." The caption notes that this lorry hints at the Chinese connection to gold and reveals the movement of mining goods. And there's a skull and crossbones on that image, which is very striking. Okay, I want to shift now to thinking about materialities, which is obviously very closely related. And this picks up on the really, really beautiful work that all members of the team and the exhibit talk about co-laboring and the ways in which you know, the co-laboring as expressing both this kind of work that Christophe mentioned about the kind of ways in which communality and certain forms of kind of bodily and social consensus get created through co-laboring, but also the sort of ways that co-laboring brings together the substances of gold in its encounters with water, earth, mercury, cyanide, asphalt, trees, human bodies, animal bodies. That really comes to the fore in so many of the parts of the exhibit. Again, in the monument that is created, that is, you know, both a documentation to the artisanal miners who've been killed around the region around Kajitia, and this is in the exhibit section, and a kind of you know, recognition of mining labor, and the caption refers to the way that the start of plastering the artwork with a plaster made of a mixture of paint and local earth that ties the artwork to earthly matters and strengthens the resemblance between the act of colorful painting of the bags and the way in which women paint their houses. There's also a really extraordinary picture that documents the trace of chicken feet walking across powder money, which is this kind of, you know, granular gold dust kind of amalgam that we see in a lot of artisanal mining sites. And the caption notes that gold mining and processing ore takes place in the middle of communities of farmers who keep animals, goats, chicken, and cattle, and the pathways of migrant mining and agricultural livelihoods that is documented in this on this surface. There's also references to this kind of convening of materialities in Uganda, in these strategies to organize the space around a stream of water through the banana trunks, through sawn off banana trunks that are constructing canals for the flow of water. And this really sort of shows the ways in which banana cultivation and mining are coexisting. And this, this is really a dimension of small-scale mining that often gets missed, the ways in which it is really used in as a kind of diversification strategy with other kinds of economies. And finally, I just wanted to point to the really extraordinary ways in which the overlapping and cross-cutting of different kinds of visual and tactical regimes are mobilized within the exhibit. We see all sorts of ways of looking and seeing and mapping. As Esther pointed out, that sort of different, and also Ronald, these levels and scales of the aerial, the on the ground, the underground. This, of course, is building on the work of members of the team about the relationship between 2D and 3D and how to kind of think about the underground in mining. Also the kinds of visual regimes that are mobilized through photography and through painting. I thought that was really beautifully done at a bunch of moments. I just want to pick up on a couple of them. One, the reference to a young girl who's looking at some photographs in the exhibit, and I was really struck by the caption, which is "Girl with a Gaze." This girl, the caption says, "This girl is particularly interested in the photo from Uganda showing a sophisticated cyanization site." And the use of gaze is very key here, right? Because gaze is sort of often thought of in terms of these kind of colonial or consuming and often masculine kind of modes, and sort of the disruption of having this girl's gaze having this kind of moment. I found really telling and really compelling. Another example is, where these things come together so interestingly is in one called The Mine and a Stone Line. And it's the way a drawing that is made by Zachary based on information from the internet, providing the surface boundaries of the concession. So the ways in which these things get represented. In another, Zachary traces the direction of the underground ore body on his motorbike and marks GPS points on an app called SW Maps. And I really just appreciate the way in which the need to have this online exhibit really kind of extended this project in terms of thinking about, okay, now we're going to have a virtual exhibit in order to engage with all of these things. So in conclusion, I just want to, sort of step outside a little bit for a second and talk about several people have made reference to the ways in which small-scale miners are stigmatized and the kind of flattening of miners' livelihoods, the projection of miners as kind of abject in certain kinds of ways or very, so much at the victim of circumstance that, that's all that can be seen. And while of course, this exhibit recognizes the inequality and the violence that goes on, there's this real emphasis on the way in which getting by day to day, as Eleanor mentions, is also contains joy, and it also contains a number of kinds of rounded, modes of life. And the way that Nee talks about his photographs and the portraits that he took, and the kind of in between lives, the need to emphasize not only the work but also other things, the entertainment that Mario refers to. And I just think this is really a key dimension of small scale mining that people who really take the time notice, and that tends to get lost, and there are political motivations for the reasons why it gets lost, because it's very much the convenience of certain, say transnational corporations to see this as a kind of, abject livelihood that really we just need to kind of get rid of as quickly as possible. So I just, thanks a lot for the opportunity to participate, and I look forward to further co-laboring together. So thank you.
Elizabeth, thank you very much for your very generous comments, which we've really appreciated. I know you have to rush to a class and make your own livelihood today, so please don't feel you need to hold on, but thank you. We are now going to turn to a couple of recordings, and this is Carlos, one of our PhD researchers in Brazil, in conversation with a miner, and Esther in conversation with a miner, partly we would have liked them to join today, but because of the IT issues. Okay, so Camilla, if you'd like to play the recordings, and then it's the time for the Q&A.
Gilson, primeiro, muito obrigado, né, por você ter aceito o convite de dar seu depoimento sobre a nossa exposição virtual, né, do projeto Gold Matters. E para começar, eu gostaria que você falasse o seu nome, a cidade na qual você está falando e qual que é a sua relação profissional com a atividade de mineração artesanal de pequena escala na Amazônia.
Meu nome é Gilson Gomes Camboim. Eu fui presidente de uma cooperativa de garimpeiros no norte do estado de Mato Grosso, que é a Cogavep. Estou presidente na FECOMIN, a Federação das Cooperativas de Mineração do estado de Mato Grosso. Eu moro aqui na região norte do estado, mais precisamente na cidade de Guarantã do Norte, que fica na região do Vale do Rio Peixoto. E já estou há alguns anos atuando com a atividade da mineração em pequena escala.
Perfeito. Gilson, e para entrar em detalhes um pouquinho sobre a nossa exposição, o que você achou da exposição? Quanto à sua percepção, o que chamou a atenção nas fotos, aquilo que você acha que tem uma diferença nessa exposição virtual?
Bom, eu vi que as fotos, ela mostra a mineração em pequena escala. Acredito que poderia ter, no caso, a questão mostrar a parte das recuperações das áreas após o processo de extração, as novas atividades econômicas. Aqui, para a nossa região, a atividade de mineração em pequena escala, ela atua como um fortalecimento da economia local e também na diversidade de novas alternativas econômicas. Então, isso fortalece os pequenos, né, que proporciona a eles oportunidade tanto financeira quanto ambiental de aprimorar e de crescimento.
Muito obrigado. E quando você estava olhando as salas, né, da exposição, você acha que tem alguma diferença entre as fotos da África e as fotos do Brasil, na nossa região amazônica? Se tivesse a diferença, qual é que seria a diferença? O que você acha que chamou sua atenção nessa comparação de fotos, né, de diferentes países?
A gente percebe que cada país ele possui, às vezes, os seus métodos, a sua cultura, a sua metodologia, né? A gente vê que na questão de mecanização, né, a gente tem aqui no Brasil umas certas estruturas um pouco diferentes da que eles utilizam lá. Mas também a gente pode perceber que tem, nas imagens mostradas, eles também têm uma busca de conhecimento tecnológico. Então, a gente vê a questão dos usos igual computadores, GPS, essas questões, que vem, no caso, nesse sentido. Mas uma coisa que a gente vê em comum, e pelo que as fotos mostraram, é a questão do envolvimento nas comunidades, né, com as sociedades, nas cidades onde estão inseridas, né? Então, assim, aqui para nós, a gente tem cidades bem estruturada e que até hoje ainda depende muito da extração mineral, como é o caso de Peixoto de Azevedo, como é o caso de Itaituba. Então, assim, são cidades já com um número de população que possuem uma diversidade econômica, mas que, ao mesmo tempo, tem um dos pilares da economia, a extração mineral. E lá, pelo que a gente pode perceber, que vê as fotos, a gente tem certas comunidades, certas sociedades que também têm esse envolvimento e essa participação junto com a comunidade.
Maravilha. Gilson, muito obrigado.
Would that be okay for you, or how do you feel about that?
Thank you so much, Esther, for the great work that you've done. it's okay. My comment here, I remember watching an aircraft, and I was just wondering in myself and thinking very loudly what the aircraft does. Is it owned by one of the miners? And if the aircraft is owned by one of the miners, maybe to ease mobility for the miner to go come in the field, the mining site and buy gold and maybe take to sell to the market, I feel that would be very positive. And I'm just wondering if the government of that country is aware of miners owning the aircraft. If this is done in good faith and for the development of the country, it would be positive for them, and we feel these people are now advanced in their mining sector. It has moved a great deal. But it can also be at a risk for this country if the aircraft owned by the miners is not monitored. Who does the monitoring? If it is not monitored, where do they sell their gold? And when the gold is sold, it could be a risk for the country in that the money that they get from the gold, maybe they are funding insurgency in some other country. In the long run, it could be a risk to the country where you see war crimes coming up simply because, you know, people have amassed a lot of wealth from the gold and they are using it wrongly. Then the other comment I wanted to make is on where we are watching one of the videos in the sites, in the mine sites, where we see men going down in the pit.
I think we're
and they bring out
a bit.
In the handover, and the women take it out, take it to the stores.
Josephine, could you
take it to the stores?
Josephine, could you start again with the second part, because the line was breaking up a bit?
Yeah, my second comment is on the role of women. Maybe let's look at the gender roles. Where men go down in the deep, women may not be able, like in Busia, we have only 2 who can go down in the pits. They are brave enough because the pits are deep, almost close to 120 feet deep. Now, these are the women who wait for the ore out. It's in one way of kind of sharing of roles. They bring for the women out and they carry the ore to the stores for storage. Now, this also helps. Not all the women who are in these mining sites are married women. Some of them are widows. They are single mothers, but they have a responsibility to take at home. So as we engage the women also in this mining sector and bring them closer in the mines, we are helping them sustain their livelihoods and also take care of their siblings. You know, wherever you see a woman, a number one thing that will come in your mind in Africa is vulnerability. So as we bring them to work together with the men, we are trying to encourage them to be part of the mine, and also they take care of whoever they have left back at their home. Then maybe lastly, I'm commenting on the Amazon mining, where you say they are mining, their mines, they are doing alluvial mining. And I'm seeing a very big river, and I feel they are using the mercury also. I just wonder where this river ends with the movement of mercury in the mining sites and in the river. I don't know whether they have somewhere where they are controlling this mercury from, because mining is done in the river. I don't know how this actually goes on. I would like to know more about this mining, alluvial mining in the Amazon, in that river.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Josephine. Do you have other comments or questions? This is great. Thank you. Okay.
Patience, if you'd like to take over.
Well, thanks, Eleanor. And thank you, everybody, for very, very interesting exhibition. And just a reminder that you can pose your questions in the chat box. And while we're waiting for that, I have a question for Dr. Sabine Lunning, and it's about the sort of around the question around the politics of curating. And so when you started putting together the exhibition, what was the overarching message or messages that you wanted to convey? And who did you conceive of as your, how do you say, your sort of primary target initially, and how did it change or shift over the process?
Thank you, Patience. Yeah, I think we all have ideas about that, actually, because we've all thought together about it. And I think that's, like we said in the beginning, this was sort of urgency because of COVID, that we changed plans, because the pop-up exhibition, as Ellie explained, really aimed to be for miners on mining sites and bring conversations about between miners, and that's what I showed a bit, I think, in the first exhibition of the exhibition photos. And I think that when we started to go online, again, I think Ellie underlines quite strongly and justified that this is for a completely different audience. Who is it? And of course, we're trying to make it still to be for miners and to engage with mining communities, even though these possibilities, of course, in this online platform are more limited, right? So the overarching idea is to make this into a conversation on sustainability. This is part of visualizations that serve conversations otherwise, I think, against the sort of stereotypes that we know so well, that we've also talked about, I think, in our presentations. So first of all, the overarching idea is to really show these diversities of mining terrains, both sort of in its material way, but also all these lifestyles that may be so different about them. And the first hope that we have, of course, is that that yields a more interesting and a more valuable way of thinking about artisanal mining. And then indeed, just conceptually, I think that we wanted to show the way that we collaborate and what is this collaborations, its ups and its downs, so to speak, the power relations, but also the yields of it in that you get conversations otherwise. But also, I think it is important that we try to use the thematic rooms to really convey the wealth of mining, actually, in a different way than what we normally think. Thanks.
Thank you, Sabine. Again, a reminder that you can raise your hand or post a question in the chat box, and sort of following on from there. And this is a question that's directed to Mr. Ni Obadai and Mr. Christophe Sawadogo. And it's a question that sort of links into the materiality of and the challenges of trying to represent and work on an exhibition that would be virtual, and trying to, while working with the materiality, both of the techniques, painting, photography, and attempting to communicate that to a broader audience.
Should I begin?
Yes, if you can.
Okay. I mean, essentially, as I said in my presentation, I predominantly work with black and white. I'm very much interested in the chemistry of photography. So I shoot with film. It's rather a limited resource these days, but also because I think it's a great storytelling medium. And in many ways sets certainly work like I do within a sort of historical context as well. But it also is a way to connect with communities, because especially today, the more we move into the digital, into the digital future, into the digital futures, we see that working in environments like in the gold mines, people, it becomes also an attractive point for them to connect and help break down some of the mistrust or misunderstandings of what photography is and what can do and how it brings useful narratives, even on behalf of the communities. So we've also talked about doing workshops. We've done some workshops with the artists. And I think also it's funny, but in connect, you know, not exactly with gold mining, but not altogether with gold mining. I work with silver nitrate, and silver nitrate is the basis for black and white photography as well. So there's a lot of crossover interest for me in the field.
Thank you, Christoph. Maybe Cristiano, you'd like to?
Yes. Can I talk now? Can I answer to the question? Can I?
Yes, please. Thanks.
Okay. Sorry, because I'm not in the proper place. I'm in a car, and so when I started to work with these women, it is like if they are used to work in the past, they used to work on the wall with material like soil, with material like water. I only had to add glue and to mix with the soil and with the sand sometimes, and ask them to work with me. And it was easy. It's a matter only of support. We usually work, when we were in Tarko, we saw many women working on the walls using their hands.
We've lost you there for a moment, Christoph.
Something that was usual for most of them, work with the ground, with the soil. I had only to work with materials that they do you have any technical problems, or it's good? Can I continue? Can I do you hear me? Do you understand me?
Yes, yes, we do.
Okay, so sorry. When I worked, for example, on the papers with the carbon, with the inks, and with the ground, I think it was also easy because most of these materials, they have already seen it before, and it's just now to show how I work with, and it was now easy for them to do that. And coming to the exhibition, I think that it's importing something that was, yes, in a material plan to a virtual plan. And I think that, yes, it is a matter of connection, and I hope that everybody can understand.
Thank you. And I see that Ni has his hand up, but there's a question for you, actually, from from Titus Sowen. And the question is both a comment and a question, and it is: experimenting myself with photographing artisanal and small-scale mining during my PhD fieldwork, I can affiliate with the reluctance of miners to be photographed. How did the use of Polaroid enable you to overcome the initial fear of miners being portrayed?
Okay, before I answer Titus's message, I'll end with something that I feel I left out on the materiality. Is that when we set up the exhibition in Kejitia, the first and only, so far only pop-up exhibition we've managed to do, one of the things that we saw was that bringing in the physical prints, because so often nowadays the miners and we ourselves are looking at images through very small screens, our video, our mobile phones, and bringing in these enlarged prints into the community really brought a lot of connect and ability for the community to see each other, because some people were able to recognize some of the members of the community of the miners themselves, and other members of the community within the photography. So I think it was also, so bringing in the prints was also sort of like a family album, but at the same time, working with the other parts, showing the other parts of the world that were mining, allowed it to be a more informative experience for them. So the exhibition in itself was a really wonderful experience to that. Now, that also kind of links in terms of the materiality. Titus asks about the Polaroid prints. Well, one of the things that happened when I first started going into the mining communities was that people would assume that I'm coming to profit from them. As a photographer, there's this idea that we come in and we're taking the pictures and we're going to make a lot of money from these images, and at the same time portray them in negative ways. And I think this is due to the way maybe a lot of situations in Africa have been projected. It's always what we call poverty porn, from positions of poverty porn. So one of the ways that the Polaroids helped me do, because I had to find a way to sort of break down and to stop going into long discussions about what I'm going to be doing with the photographs. So one of the ways, and how I'm going to portray them. So one of the ways that helped, that the Polaroids helped with this, was allow them to see my perspective of photographing them, and allowing them to see that I'm coming from a position of dignity. And of course, there's this exchange that takes place where I give the Polaroid to them as a gift also. So there's it helps to break down those misconceptions. Yeah.
Thank you, Ni. And here I think I'll direct a question to Eleanor, the project lead for the Gold Matters. And this is it's a question about comparison over what is oftentimes seen as a contentious area of livelihood. And I guess the question is, how you navigate the comparative questions and the varying political contexts with artisanal and small-scale mining is occurring across all these project sites that not just cover varying project sites in Africa, but also in continental perspective.
Thank you. I really welcome that question. I didn't want to elaborate at the start. One of the points that we have been picking up within this project is, almost as a starting point, because we have worked on this area for many years, many of us, was about heterogeneity and the heterogeneity that exists across mining sites within and between countries and within and between continents. So one of the things that we have sought to do is to try and understand what transformation might be from below, in a way, capturing this heterogeneity, using, of course, case studies, but being driven by anthropology, and being able to look at the case studies and capture issues like mobility, so not just within national borders and using national frames. But then there are themes that come up that are across countries, and a lot around the politics. That you'll have very specific politics in different countries and different regions of the world, but issues that are also coming up again and again around political barriers and institutional barriers to change, and some of the ways that people are portrayed, but particularly what we have wanted to do by looking at different sites and looking about the movement of people and matter and technology is to be able to capture this heterogeneity rather than saying that everybody within mining is homogeneous and all practices are unsustainable. People aren't taking action. We've been wanting to show how actually there are many changes taking place very dynamically within the artisanal and small scale gold mining sector. I think I'll end it there. I could go on. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor. And there's a question here that I think actually I'll direct to Ms. Esther van der Kamp, who's been doing her PhD in Uganda, because it connects the sort of visual representations, but also the context and the dynamics and sort of going on the ground. So the question is from Papa Sao, and it says, photographs show visually the damage caused on the environment, but in also the storytellings, can you say that this matter was also discussed in depth with the miners? What kind of politics of resilience are miners undertaking to protect the environment against products they're using and against human impact damages? And then he says, to me, miners' resilience for protecting the environment is not shown enough in the photographs, at least the ones shown here. What comments do you have on this matter?
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much for this question. It's of course a very important question. Yeah, I can answer in a few ways. I think first, I'd like to say that where I did fieldwork in southeastern Uganda, gold was there in a residential area. So mining took place in a residential area. So thinking about sustainability and thinking about the future and mining and living there was common for miners. So miners talk about sustainability a lot also amongst themselves, not only if I am there doing research, for example. So that is a common topic. And one of the ways, for example, in which miners have showed that they were thinking about limiting and damage to the environment, for example, was how to design a mine. So in the extraction phase, and they worked together with an NGO called Environmental Women for Action and Development. It's an NGO from Uganda, based in Entebbe, and they inspired from mining in Tanzania. They introduced the method of timbered shafts. So instead of creating an open cast, taking up lots of land, making a shaft started by eucalyptus timber. And it's a method that miners understand there to be more safe and also to take up less land. So more land is available still for farming, for example, or for to live. And one of the challenges with this method is that the ground in the underground geological structures in Busia, southeastern Uganda, are quite different from the ground in Tanzania. There's a lot more soil, a big layer of soft soil, which makes it challenging in some places to build these timbered shafts. So there you can see that this is one example of how miners experiment with different technologies and how that is also then again challenges with local differences between different places. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Esther. And we could go on this very interesting conversation, but would like to apologize for going slightly over time. And I'd like to hand back to Eleanor for closing remarks. Thank you.
All I'm going to say, given that we've really hit the time barrier, is thank you very much for joining us today. Camilla is just about to show a slide which has details on the project, and also after this slide, the link to the exhibition. So thank you very much for joining us. And please, any questions, you're very free to email any of us, and myself included. Thank you.